This meeting is being recorded.
Hi everyone, my name is Lizzie Bendrick. We are getting the slides ready, so just give us one more moment while people log in. Thank you for joining us and thank you for your patience. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're a few minutes after. Again, thank you everyone for your patience. Hi, I am Lizzie Bendrick, the Trails Program Manager for the County of San Diego, Department of Parks and Recreation. Thank you for making time to coming to this meeting tonight. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to share an exciting study with you, one that will connect the San Diego watershed via dozen miles of continuous trails and amenities. This project has been a work in progress for decades, but was recently prioritized by the County Board of Supervisors. So we are here tonight to share an overview of the study with you, where we are now, who's involved, and what is next. Next slide, please. There we go. Just a quick overview. Oh, sorry, one more back. Thank you. Oh, perfect. All right, so here's some of the topics that we will be covering tonight. A little bit of background on the River Park and Trail, a high-level overview of the analysis, the next steps, how to stay involved, and we'll leave plenty of time for questions, answers, comments. Okay, so again, the purpose of the funding feasibility analysis and objective is to identify and evaluate candidate funding options to present to the Board of Supervisors. This is to inform their decision of next steps for implementing a funding option for the San Diego River Park. So there has been a lot of initial outreach and engagement with the community and stakeholders during this project, the analysis of different funding mechanisms, all of which we are very excited to share with you tonight. Perfect. So meet your hosts. As I've mentioned a couple times, my name is Lizzie Bendrick from the County of San Diego. We have Jessica Geisler, the Marketing and Public Outreach Manager, Josh Miguel, the Region Manager from our Operations Division, and we have some of our consultants here, Mark Buckley and Laura Marshall from Echo Northwest. They've really been focusing on the funding feasibility analysis and all of the different mechanisms that we're looking at. And then we have Jack Hughes and Beryl Foreman from Kearns and West. They have been focusing on communications and outreach for the study, all in coordination with the county. Okay. So just some housekeeping. We are using the Zoom webinar platform. So you won't have access to the microphone or camera, but you will be able to write in questions or comments using the Q&A feature. Just click the Q&A icon in your toolbar and type in your question. We'll either respond directly in the answer section, or we'll do our best to address your comment in the live Q&A session at the end. You may also want to write down the phone number and meeting ID on your screen that you see here on your screen, so you can call in if you do lose internet connection. A recorded version will also be available online after the presentation is completed. This is just how you would see it on your mobile phone. In the bottom right corner, you see the Q&A, so you can click that and type in your question there. Now, to begin, the San Diego River watershed is home to millions of people and at least 25 state and federally listed threatened plants and animal species. It flows through Lakeside, Santee, the city of San Diego, county land, land of multiple tribal governments, and the Cleveland National Forest. The vision is to establish a trail system from the mountains to the ocean, so potentially the town of Julian down to the mouth of the Pacific Ocean at Ocean Beach. This connected system will serve as a unifying thread for the San Diego River Park system and will offer recreational amenities and access to park facilities and nature in general. The main trail is called the San Diego River Trail, which is a multi-purpose path for pedestrians, cyclists, and equestrians in some areas. Many residents, landowners, environmental agencies, nonprofits, and other stakeholders have engaged in decades of care and stewardship for this unique resource. As you can see here in this map and mentioned on the previous slide, there are multiple jurisdictions within the San Diego watershed. Many entities along the watershed are involved in efforts to preserve, restore, and enhance the San Diego River and the surrounding areas. The largest effort is to create a continuous trail along the San Diego River to provide residents and visitors with an opportunity to explore and appreciate this unique and valuable resource. Here's a look at the completed sections of the trail in dark green, the planned segments in yellow, and existing sidewalks in light green. We have many regional trails within the San Diego County, but we wanted to highlight the Trans-County Trail in purple, as the San Diego River Trail could potentially coexist and co-locate with it in some sections of the backcountry. In this slide, as you can see, we're focusing on trail alignment, but in the overall study, we're looking at other amenities in the San Diego River watershed, such as habitat restoration, staging areas, and other park amenities that you would find for other trails and greenways. There have been numerous efforts to develop a continuous trail and park system along the San Diego River. Groups have developed visions and plans for the project with decades of feedback from multiple stakeholders, including residents, landowners, wildlife and environmental agencies, and other groups. We've listed a few examples here, but we encourage you to connect with these agencies to learn more. So take note. You can see on this slide, we include the San Diego River Park Foundation, County of San Diego, City of San Diego, the San Diego River Conservancy. So we encourage you again to visit those websites to learn more. We thought it would be helpful to provide a bit of history that led us to this funding feasibility study of San Diego River Park. In March 2021, the County Board of Supervisors, Chair Nathan Fletcher, assembled a task force related to the San Diego River Park. One of the issues identified by the task force was that there was no set funding source to acquire land, implement trails, and complete other projects along the river, and for ongoing operations and maintenance. One of the outcomes of the task force was that a long-term funding mechanism was needed to turn this long-term vision into a reality. In November 2021, the Board of Supervisors considered this recommendation by the task force, and they allocated $500,000 to hire consultants to assess the long-term funding mechanisms that could be implemented to pay for various aspects of a broader and connected San Diego River. And with that, I'd like to pass this on to Mark Buckley from Echo Northwest.
Thanks, Lizzie. So I'll be giving you an overview of how this analysis has been structured, what we've been doing. We have several tracks moving at the same time for this work. This chart here shows some of the timelines since the board initially requested this study starting in November 21. So we've been moving quickly to complete all of this work by this summer. So we have two key tracks for the work: the outreach component, which is intended to provide opportunities for inclusion and hear all voices in the community, but also to collect data for the set of technical analyses that we have. We have a systematic approach to reviewing all of the available funding options and thinking through what are the key criteria for what the right funding strategy will be. So we want to start by thinking about what are the important investments that will be necessary, what are the costs of those investments, what are the benefits and beneficiaries of those investments, and then use that to evaluate the full suite of available funding options, both in terms of existing funding strategies and funding tools and new options that might not have been used in this way in this area before. We have already held a public meeting earlier this year, and we've had several community briefings and other opportunities for stakeholder input. We can go to the next slide, please. That really started with targeted interviews across a wide range of stakeholders, starting with business, local residents, representatives from the private sector, and thinking through all of the key jurisdictions that have responsibilities or a stake in the success of this project in terms of City of San Diego, City of Santee, Lakeside, Community Founded, River Park, Lakeside River Park Conservancy, San Diego River Park Foundation, San Diego River Conservancy, several groups that have been involved in this process for for decades, as we've said. And this process will be ongoing. This is really the start of the outreach and coordination process across all of these different groups. For example, working with the Forest Service to understand how we will design, plan, and ultimately fund the trail all the way up through its headwaters. Next slide. And part of the process was to be as open and inclusive of all residents and users of the potential trail or the current corridor. This included an online survey that we conducted that the county posted and publicized widely through emails and with quite a bit of support from other partner organizations. And we had over 800 respondents, which was very useful. This is a little sample of some of the key responses that tell us about the kind of respondents that we had. Again, this wasn't a statistically valid population survey. This was more of an open survey. So it's based largely on who was able to respond. Most of the respondents, as you see here, are actual trail users, those who are visiting the trails, using the trails, but we also have some representation from organizations involved with the trail. The chart on the right here is some of the key benefits that the respondents saw from the trail system and the overall completion of the park, with recreation being at the top, but also environmental benefits, tourism, and commuting opportunities. The word cloud in the middle, some of the responses we had in terms of funding sources that people are aware of and might recommend for the overall system moving forward. So it's representative of a very diverse set of potential funding sources, and I think that's indicative of where the research is taking us. If we go to the next slide and start to talk about some of this. So thinking about the benefits, this is really where we want to start our evaluation, both of the importance of this investment, why it should be a priority, but also how it should be implemented and designed. That there is the focus on resource protection and improvement in addition to recreation and tourism, commuting. So there are opportunities for improving wildlife habitat, environmental quality, air quality, water quality, carbon sequestration, wildlife viewing and stewardship, and overall regional connectivity from communities and jurisdictions and various agencies. And one of the key objectives here is to help the community from the public and private perspective face the river, face the corridor, focus on it, see its potential, and help to motivate and coordinate investment in the corridor. We can go to the next slide, please. This wide range of potential benefits and potential actors in the overall process are reflected in the range of costs and the diversity of costs that any funding strategy will need to be able to address. That we aren't just talking about the construction costs, ongoing operation and maintenance, but there are a whole series of permitting, planning, design, long-term management, habitat mitigation costs, and the acquisition costs that might go along with this based on how aggressive any strategy will be in terms of easements and corridor acquisition. So in our overall final report, which will be available to the public before the Board of Supervisors meeting this summer, we will have the whole range of costs included. These costs are also important from the perspective of how the funding sources are identified, because not all funding sources can address all costs. I'll get to that in a moment. And these estimates are very sensitive to the pace of implementation and how active the county or the communities want to be in acquiring some of those last pieces of land where there are important gaps in the overall park and trail network. I think we can go on to the next slide. So when we're thinking about these funding options, we have a whole range of criteria that we want to keep in mind. You know, we are looking at over $100 million costs, likely potentially substantially more than that, depending on how the overall acquisition strategy is conducted. But those costs need to be keeping in mind what the current opportunities are for funding that have already provided an important basis for the development of the park and trail system today. That includes aggressive pursuit of state and federal grant opportunities. San Diego River Conservancy, the state organization in particular, has been an important partner in that, as have private developers. The private development has played an important role and will continue to play a critical role in implementation of the overall corridor development for the trail and park system. We do recognize that coordination across jurisdictions will be a challenge as well as an opportunity, and we need to keep that in mind when we're evaluating the funding options. That there is a range of funding priorities that will arise across the jurisdictions, and to the fullest extent that the benefits can drive the prioritization, but also the funding development, that there is value being generated through these investments, through the park and trail, and that those benefits ideally are leveraged and focused in a way to help generate the funds necessary to create and maintain the system. Also, we always want to be considerate of the equity implications of the funding options, both in terms of types of investments that are made, but also how the funds are generated and allocated. Next slide, please. So, starting with this review of stakeholder concerns, investment needs, benefit opportunities, we then looked systematically across all available funding sources, starting with the existing funding sources that are already in play and funding sources for similar projects in the region and across the state, and then looking across the range of other opportunities that might be a bit more creative and might have been used for investments of this sort, but not necessarily in the San Diego region. So as I've mentioned before, state and federal grants have played an important role, and certainly general fund revenue sources from the cities and the county have played important steps. And there are systems of fees and charges, including associated with private development, that have helped to maintain and develop the system that we have today. There also are opportunities for infrastructure tax districts, one in particular, the Enhanced Infrastructure Finance District, that's seen a lot of attention, whereby investments that improve an area and increase private investment can then be funded through the increases in tax revenue that is generated from increases in property value and increases in development. A key point there is that it's not a new tax, it's not an increase in taxes, it's just a way to focus increases in tax revenue associated with increases in property value back into the investments that helped motivate and generate that increase in tax revenue. There also are other forms of local community voter approved taxes and fees in terms of community facilities districts and maintenance assessment districts that have been used for improvements in infrastructure and maintenance of infrastructure in this sort of community scale. And then sales tax and other forms of taxes have been important roles. And then financing mechanisms in terms of how we will finance major capital expenses that can then be paid off through other revenue sources over time. Next slide, please. So we have a series of funding options that we were able to whittle down from the overall identifiable set to those that are most feasible. And we want to look at their, this is sort of a sample of sort of the key funding mechanisms and some of the key criteria that we use to think about them. In particular, whether they can be used for all of the costs or only a subset. So for example, on the right-hand column, not all of these funding mechanisms can be used for operation and maintenance expenses. And also whether the potential revenue generation would be sufficient for the magnitude of costs and time of costs that we're thinking about. Voter approval is an important step. It can be a critical way to assess the public support and verify public will for these kinds of investments, but there are important costs associated in terms of time and election costs. Next slide, please. And so we had, as I mentioned, a series of criteria. The final report will go into much more detail on this, but some of the key criteria for evaluating the options and describing the various funding options to include thinking about the equity implications, what it will cost, including time, administrative, but other planning and overall process costs associated with those, where there are opportunities and needs to collaborate across jurisdictions. And we know that the trail is going to be multi-jurisdictional, so that will be an important step. Where there are geographic regions that might need to be defined. And again, this relates back to the benefits and the beneficiaries. So if we're thinking about district areas that might have a higher level of responsibility for funding, we want to make sure those relate to the areas that are seeing the benefit, including from a private property development piece. There are the election costs for the options that require voter approval, as we mentioned. And then there's also the debt financing costs that can be an important overall share of the cost of any option, especially if part of the strategy is an aggressive early effort to make major investments that then will be paid off over time. So we want to then be able to look at across the revenue generation potential and all of the costs associated with any option. What is that net revenue or funding available that will be associated? I know that there's a lot of potential detail here, and we're looking forward to answering some of your questions as they come up. Next slide, please. Okay, I guess I'll turn back to Lizzie here.
Thank you, Mark. All right, so again, the purpose of this meeting is to give the public an overview and to inform all of you of the board-directed funding feasibility study for the River Park that's ongoing. So there are a lot of ways to stay involved. I wanted to say thank you to everyone that took the survey and thank you for making time tonight. We will be having in the summer of 2022, please attend the board meeting. If you're interested in staying up to date, you can email me at trails@sdcounty.ca.gov. As always, you can visit our parks development plan. So use that QR code that will take you right to the link. Next slide, please. Before we head into the Q&A, I just wanted to do a quick recap of some of the housekeeping. We are on Zoom webinar platform, so you won't have access to that camera or microphone, but you will be able to comment or question using the Q&A feature. Just click on the icon, type in your question. We will answer it live, or we will be able to respond to you directly via text. Again, a recording will be available after this session in the next couple of days or so. The next slide is the mobile. There you go. Should be on the bottom banner on the bottom right area. With that, I would like to introduce Jessica Geisler, Parks and Recs Marketing and Public Outreach Manager. She will be hosting our Q&A session.
All right, thank you, Lizzie. For those of you who don't know me, yes, Jessica Geisler. I work in the marketing office for the County Parks and Rec Department, and I am happy to be here to host your Q&A session. The questions are starting to come through, so please bear with us as we get through each one of those. In some situations, there are very similar questions, so I might pull those together, but we will make sure that everything is addressed. So I'm going to kick things off with a question from Mark. Mark is asking if we can make the GIS files for the slideshow exhibits available, such as the one that shows the completed sections, gaps, etc. And I will hand that one over to Lizzie.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for your question. Yes, all of the maps and files will be available in the report that will be coming out closer to the Board of Supervisor date. We actually got a lot of our resources from our partners at the San Diego River Park Foundation and the San Diego River Conservancy. So a lot of our maps are based on what they have already done, that great research. So I encourage you to check those out. But again, everything will be in the report.
Great, thank you. All right, so Marianne is asking if we can be more specific about when the report will be available to the public prior to that Board of Supervisors meeting. This is another question for Lizzie.
So, hi, Marianne. Thank you for your question. So right now we're slated for the end of June. As you know, some of our items get pushed depending on a variety of things. So I believe it will be coming out, if it is June, it'd be coming out earlier in the June month, but that is something I can definitely follow up with you on as we learn more and continue this study. And I know how to get a hold of you. So thank you very much for your question.
All right, thank you. Next question comes from Peter. Peter is asking, how does the public access that financing report? So I can give that one to Lizzie or to Mark.
Mark, if you can take that, go for it.
Well, I assume this is when it will be released before the board meeting, and I'm not sure how soon that will be. Or how much ahead of time? Is it about a week before the board meeting where it's presented? And my understanding is not exactly set when that will be. So if you're on one of the email lists or watching the website, is that probably the best way to be notified?
Yes,
Yeah.
and I can, oh, go ahead, Jess.
No, you go ahead.
Yes, I can follow up since that is a consistent question. I do have a very good distribution list of everyone, and I can get a hold of you when that report will be available.
And we can also post it on our website. So yes, definitely stay tuned to stparks.org, get on Lizzie's email distribution list, and you'll be the first to see it as it comes through. All right, so our next question is coming from Drew, I believe. Drew's asking how many miles of trail are already completed and how many miles still need to be built. Lizzie, you want to take this one?
Or, I was just trying to check quickly if you don't have it handy, Lizzie. I'm not sure if we have this exact. I know that we have about, I think there are around 40 to 60 miles of trail that's currently completed. Sort of it depends on how you define the trail because there are sidewalk segments currently, and our focus has been on the planned segments that haven't been addressed yet. Let me keep checking on that, and we'll see if we can get an answer before the meeting's over.
Okay, thank you. And if we don't have an answer for that, for some reason, we can always, maybe we can write down Drew's contact information. So Lizzie, we can follow up once we have some more specific information to share. All right, Bill is asking if there's anything we can do going forward to help the trail become a reality. Great question. Hand that one over to Lizzie about participation opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. It's always great to hear some support. For this, stay tuned. I think this is such a great opportunity to set the precedent for a lot of our regional trails that we have. I think supporting your local nonprofits as well as some of the state conservancies is always helpful, staying to date on what they're doing. They have awesome volunteer opportunities. In the county itself, we're always looking into the river park. So the best thing I could say to you to stay involved and to support is to stay informed, and you can do that through the County of San Diego. You can do it through the River Park Foundation, the San Diego River Conservancy, and all of those great partners that we mentioned before, U.S. Forest Service, the list goes on. But thank you for your question.
All right, our next one is a little bit long, but I'm going to read through it because I think it's a wonderful question. P is asking, as a long distance backpacker who has hiked the not fully completed San Diego Trans-County Trail 3 times, what's the feasibility of this route as a multi-day backpacking trip? Mission Trails Regional Park seems to be a natural place to camp, the Kumeyaay Lake Campground, but are there other campgrounds or possibilities along the route? And I'll hand that over to the team, but I will say this is definitely a multi-jurisdictional project. And so every jurisdiction is going to have say in what types of recreation options are feasible at that location. But I love the enthusiasm for creating more recreation opportunities. So I imagine we'll delve more into this once we have that funding secured. But Lizzie, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that was pretty much what I was going to say. At this time, we are really focused on how we can actually fund this long 52-mile trail. As Jessica mentioned, it's multiple jurisdictions. And so in partnership, I think we'd be able to come up with a few great ideas on how we can make that happen eventually. But right now, we're focused on this process and a way to fund the river park.
And I might add that we've been having some really good conversations with the Forest Service. They're very enthusiastic and supportive, and they have identified the fact that complementary facilities like that for access, trailheads, bathrooms, and I think campgrounds might even fit into that, would need to be a part of this. But it could be a complicated process where there are special use permits and other ways that the county could even play a role within the boundaries of the national forest. So I think that's an important need to highlight that we'll make sure we hear.
Great, thank you. And a reminder to everybody who's listening in today, you have all of your experts online right now, ready to answer your questions. So if you have any comments or questions you want to share, this is a really great opportunity to get all the right people at the table to help respond. So send those questions in. All right, so Peter has a question regarding funding sources. Is it a single funding option that will be recommended, or is it possible that multiple sources will be considered and combined together?
That's a great question, an important one. And that was part of the reason I was trying to show the diversity and variation in the kinds of costs and how some funding mechanisms are only suitable for certain sets of those expenses. And we think across different jurisdictions, the history of funding is from a variety of sources, and we wanted to respect that and continue to take advantage of those. So definitely it will be a combination, a portfolio, and there might even be temporal components where in the short term, there might be certain funding sources that before, say in the long term, with some of the real investment that has added value to the area can be accessed. And I think that the recommendations will likely be at a relatively high level, but the implementation will include several different funding sources.
All right, thank you for that clarification. We have another question from Marianne. Marianne's asking if the report only comes out a week or so before that Board of Supervisors hearing, will the only way to comment on the report be at the board hearing? And that is a wonderful question. So I will hand that to Lizzie.
Marianne, I'd like to follow up with you just so I don't misinform anyone about the actual dates and the timeframes and the best way to comment, whether it will be at the board hearing or some sort of internal review or via email. So that is something I can follow up on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The last question I have in here, so again, send them in if you have any, is coming from a phone number, it looks like, and they're asking, they're wondering about the plan within Mission Trails Regional Park, asking if the walkway will be on Father Junipero Cerro Road or is a new trail planned. That's pretty specific for that location. I don't know, Lizzie or Mark, would you have any details on that?
I will say that we have been working closely with the city of San Diego. We've had reoccurring meetings with them. So for this specific plan, I think reaching out to the foundation or the city of San Diego might be the best route there. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Again, they have been a wonderful partner through this process, but as for that very specific question, I can't answer it on the spot. So thank you though.
I think, maybe a key point to highlight is that this is not a planning study in terms of the trail or the park network, and we were relying on existing routes and existing plans. So to the extent any of the plans that Lizzie identified earlier in the presentation that are already available, though if any of those have specifics in there, I know that we have some maps that we've used, and there was an earlier question about the availability of those maps that basically looking at San Diego River Conservancy and some of those other plans that have already been made would probably be the best way to answer those questions. But recognizing this will probably evolve in the future still. It's not settled.
All right, we had kind of a related question from Drew asking if all of the sections of this trail system are expected to be walkable by novice hikers. I imagine the overall goal is to expand multi-use trails that of course would be accessed by folks of all ages and interests and abilities. But again, I think it's too soon to see what is financially feasible and also to kind of work through all the different landowners and those different stretches of highlighted trail. But I don't if we have any ideas about what the trail system might look like. Lizzie or Mark, would you have any comments there?
It's 52 miles, so it's going through a lot of different terrain. If you're familiar with San Diego, you're walking in Ocean Beach that is nice and paved. Once you start heading out in the back country, you're going to be on a more natural path. So I would say the levels will vary. There will be something for everybody depending on where you are along the trail.
And I'll add that our conversations with the Forest Service once you get upstream of El Capitan Reservoir, so the upper headwaters sections of the trail, it's not planned right now, and there's the intention to avoid tribal land. So the route is going to take a wider path away from the river, and it's not clear what that path will be right now. I'm talking to the Forest Service, sort of the longer and the lower grade the trails, the more expensive they can be, the more direct and potentially steeper, the less expensive it can be to develop those kinds of trails, and depending on whether you have to cut through granite, things like that. So it might be a function of what the funding levels actually are to some extent too.
Great, thank you. And it's always good to highlight the diversity of our geography here in San Diego too, right? We've got coast, we've got valleys, we've got mountains, we've got deserts. So definitely a lot to work through, but it's one of the reasons I think we all enjoy living here too, right? Okay, so I just wanted to throw out here, the Mission Trails Regional Park Foundation had a fun comment. They're saying on behalf of Mission Trails Regional Park Foundation, they hope that they can be more involved as this project moves forward. So that kind of complements that question we had earlier this evening. All right, Bill is asking, what will the Board of Supervisors be doing at the meeting where the report is presented? For example, will they be approving funding, or is it something else? And Lizzie, I believe that one is for you.
Yes, I can take that one. So again, the purpose of this study is to analyze different funding mechanisms and recommend different options to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration. So that is our directive, is for their consideration. Hopefully when this is done in the next couple months, we will be able to present those awesome options, and they'll be able to choose one and potentially move forward with it. But right now it's just for their consideration.
On a separate point, I think Laura Marshall, who's turned her camera on, she might have more detail on the existing and needed trail segment lengths. Is that right, Laura?
Sure. Yeah, I have the exact numbers to close the loop on that. And so, Mark, you were pretty much correct with the about 60 miles, depending on how you define it. I would say that definitely is the correct answer. But when we think about the planned trail from the Pacific Ocean to about El Capitan Reservoir, that's about 9.6 miles of trail that have been completed, and about 40.3 of sidewalks that you could consider part of the accessibility that have been completed. And then another 40.8 miles are what's planned. And that's on both sides of the river for the most part. So that would be more than just to get a single trail from the 52 miles from point A to point B. Essentially, this would be the fullest accessibility version of it. And then similarly, past El Capitan Reservoir, it's about 20.4 miles.
Great, thank you for that. Got some instant information. We have a comment in here from Susie Murphy. Susie saying, thank you for the work here. The San Diego Mountain Biking Association stands by to assist in sustainable trail design and providing input as various land managers work with the county on this worthy project. So thank you, Susie, for sharing that with us.
Maybe if I can chime in there, just having worked on these sorts of issues, and this relates to, I think, a few of these points in terms of what you can do to be involved and what the priorities are. We recognize as economists that there are high opportunity costs, that there are limited public resources, and all of these jurisdictions need to be careful stewards of the public resources, both in terms of finances and land. So we're not making a recommendation in terms of prioritizing this investment over other investments. It's not that kind of analysis, but that's what local leadership will have to weigh. And so communicating and thinking about how you see this as a priority relative to other priorities for the region will be an important decision for the communities, especially the cities, as they think through their potential involvement in this process with the county.
Great, very well said. With that, I don't see any additional questions or comments in here, so I'm going to end my part of the meeting. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure to host the Q&A session. I'm going to hand it back to Lizzie.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Jess for moderating, Mark and Laura for contributing. Again, my name is Lizzie Bendrick. I have a couple follow-up items to give to everybody, which I have your emails. Please keep attending. Please keep emailing me. And the address is right here, trails@sandiegocounty.ca.gov. I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you.